Hey guys, tonight we're going to lie beneath the ancient hush of leaves, listening to the slow, sacred music of water falling through the canopy. You're surrounded by green silhouettes, their branches cradling the night. The rain has just passed and everything smells of soil and memory. You begin to wonder, can a tree remember the rain? You probably won't survive this tree. Not even close. It was already older than you when electricity was still just an idea flickering through amber and silk. Some trees on Earth are more than 5,000 years old. They've outlived kings, cities, empires. And with each passing century, they've stood through countless storms. You can't help but ask, do they remember them? So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. I'd love to know where you're listening from and what time it is for you. Drop it in the comments if you'd like. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You rest beneath a great oak. Its bark is thick and gnarled, textured like time itself. Water clings to it in silver beads racing downward in slow trails. You imagine the rain hitting the canopy high above you, some droplets dancing off leaves, others plunging straight down through tiny gaps in the foliage like arrows of memory. In the scientific sense, trees don't have brains, no central nervous system, no mind. Yet somehow they respond subtly, patiently, precisely. When the rains come, they drink. When the skies withhold, they tighten up. And somehow year after year, season after season, they know what to do. Not just react, but anticipate. That brings you to memory. Because memory, at its core, isn't about thought. It's about persistence. A trace. A mark left behind. And in that sense, trees are excellent rememberers. Their bark alone is a kind of rough diary. It holds the scorch marks of sun, the lines carved by wind, the soft erosion of age. In certain trees, the texture of the bark changes with wet years versus dry ones, thicker or thinner, more cracked or smooth. It's not language, but it's legible to those who know how to read it. And then there are the scars. Lightning strikes leave long, pale streaks down the trunk, visible for centuries. A woodpecker's favorite tapping spot might return year after year, drilling its own seasonal poem into the bark. If you run your fingertips across a tree's surface, you're feeling centuries of silent adaptation. Rain, wind, fire, and still, it stands. But even deeper than the bark, beneath what we see and touch, there are more subtle layers of memory. You might not notice, but after every storm, some trees release volatile oils into the air. You've smelled it, that earthy, peppery scent right after rain, petrichor. But here's the secret, the tree doesn't just release it as an accident. In some cases, it's a chemical signal, a sort of post-storm exhale. And like all chemical signals, it affects the tree's own internal state. Some scientists believe these chemical responses can alter how a tree behaves in the hours or even days after rainfall. Like a mood shift. Imagine if every time you got caught in the rain, your metabolism subtly changed for a while. Trees do that. And each time they do, they leave tiny biochemical footprints behind. So maybe memory in a tree is a trail of small physiological adjustments. A change in hormone levels. A new growth pattern. A signal passed down from leaf to trunk to root. It's not conscious, but it is consistent, like muscle memory without muscles. And you can't help but smile, thinking maybe that counts. Rain taps gently above you now. The oak above you creaks slightly as if acknowledging the change in weight. Droplets form at the edges of leaves and fall one by one to the mossy ground. Imagine you are a tree. For a moment, just pretend. Your limbs stretch outward into the dark, catching wind and drizzle. You feel the water hit your bark, run slowly downward. Beneath your skin, moisture begins to shift. Your stomata, the tiny pores in your leaves, respond. Some widen, some shrink. Your sap moves differently now. It's subtle, but it's real. This is how you remember, not in thought, but in change. Trees are slow alchemists of memory. Rain comes and they adjust. The same storm returns years later, and the tree does not react in the same way. Because it is not the same tree. Somewhere in its vast network of cells, there has been learning. Or at least, a kind of fine-tuning. Roots that grew longer during a past dry spell now pull water more efficiently. Leaves that curled from wind now grow broader, or smaller, or thicker. The rain comes again, and the tree receives it differently. So perhaps we ask the question wrong. Maybe it isn't can a tree remember the rain, but rather, how does it show that it has? You close your eyes beneath the branches. The drops continue to fall like thoughts descending into dreams. The smell of the earth rises warm and ancient. Above you, the tree holds stories you'll never hear, but you can almost feel them in your chest. The night deepens. The forest breathes. And the tree remembers without needing to know that it does. You lie still beneath the oak as the breeze shifts slightly, bringing with it the smell of wet soil and green life. Something deep within the ground stirs too, not quite a sound, more of a suggestion. A hum beneath your back, like a sleeping heartbeat. You remember where you are. You're lying above roots. Roots that listen. Beneath you, an entire world stretches out, not of tunnels or caves, but of living, seeking fingers. The tree's roots, thick and fine, extend in all directions, threading through earth like neural pathways. Not just for drinking, but for sensing, exploring, interpreting. You've probably seen diagrams of a tree's root system, neat, symmetrical, easy to label. The truth is messier and more wonderful. Roots don't just grow, they wander, twisting around stones, dipping into pockets of moisture, changing course in response to invisible signals. They're explorers, always adjusting their course, always chasing the scent of water. And they remember where they've been. In soil science, there's a term, hydrotropism. It describes how roots grow toward moisture. But in older trees, the growth patterns start to look like more than simple direction following. They become maps, historical records of where water once lived. A root will split and reach toward a place that was once wet long after the surface has dried. Like an old dog returning to a favorite pond. This is the tree's way of holding onto rain. Not the water itself, but the memory of its path. It builds an internal map, slow and sprawling, of past abundance. And sometimes when the ground above is cracked and dry, it still reaches toward the remembered well. Now think about this, when a tree first sprouts, it doesn't know the land. But within a few seasons, its roots begin to understand the rhythms of its location. Where runoff collects, where the shadows cool the soil, where drought lingers longest. In essence, it learns the personality of its place. Some scientists call this environmental imprinting. Others just say trees are good at reading their ecosystem. But there's more than instinct here. There's feedback. A root grows toward moisture. It finds it. Later, it tries the same path again. If the moisture is gone, it grows differently. Like a tiny experiment carried out in slow motion. Over decades, these adjustments build into something that starts to resemble experience. And what if roots also learn from absence? The quiet silence of a dry year when the rains don't come. Some trees respond by deepening their roots dramatically, as if bracing for more scarcity. But the truly strange part? They sometimes keep those roots even when the rains return. It's like they're saying, I remember what it was like not to have. And in that memory, they reshape their whole being. Beneath your spine, the oak's roots stretch far and quiet. You imagine them touching other roots, not just of their own kind, but of grasses, ferns, even other trees. There's something soft and communal about it, like fingertips brushing in sleep. And through these root connections, trees communicate. We'll talk more about those murmured conversations later, but for now, just rest in the idea, a root is not just a water seeker. It's a listener. It notices change. It adjusts to it. And in doing so, it carries memory and shape, not sound. You picture the roots as ancient instruments, each curve a note played by the landscape. In a way, the root system is like the forest's vinyl record. The grooves are irregular, chaotic even, but they hold the shape of every storm and every dry spell that has passed over this patch of earth. There's a lovely fringe theory, not widely accepted but quietly charming, that suggests some root systems show memory echoes. That is, when one part of a root mass receives moisture, another distant part of the same root responds as if it too has been touched. As though a single drink reverberates across a buried web. There's no consensus, but you can't help imagining it, water as a messenger passing through tunnels of time and soil. Outside, the night is still dripping, but less now. The storm is moving on. You listen to the sound of a distant owl. Somewhere below your shoulder, the tree's roots cradle droplets in tiny root hairs, absorbing them slowly, quietly. And here's a mystery. Roots often grow toward the sound of water. Not just the presence of moisture, but the sound of it moving. In experiments, roots have curled toward the vibrations of running water even when there was no moisture to be found. They heard the echo, the hint, and they followed. No one knows exactly how. Some believe it's the subtle oscillation of soil particles. Others wonder if the root tips themselves are pressure sensitive enough to detect sonic shifts. But either way, it makes you wonder, how else might a tree sense its world? There's one more oddity. In certain tropical species, root systems remember the impact of seasonal floods. Even when flooding no longer occurs, these trees grow thicker aerial roots, almost like ghost limbs, bracing for a storm that never comes. So what happens when rain becomes a memory? When the thing itself is gone, but its shape remains? For trees, it seems the past is not erased, it's built into the blueprint of their future. Roots that once reached toward life now curve in those same shapes, even when nothing waits at the end. Like a phantom limb of thirst. The owl hoots again. A breeze stirs. The earth cools as midnight deepens. And you realize beneath every forest is an invisible memoir written in root lines and echoes of rain. High above you now, the rain has stilled into a soft mist like the exhale after a long sigh. Droplets cling to the edges of leaves and the tips of twigs, quivering with the memory of motion. You look up into the crown of the oak, and for a moment you wonder, what is water doing in there? Beneath the bark, hidden from sight, is the tree's vascular system. Not unlike your own. Except instead of veins and arteries, a tree has xylem and phloem. Tonight, let's listen to the xylem. Xylem is where water travels. It moves from the roots to the leaves, pulled upward by the gentle but persistent thirst of evaporation. It's called transpiration, a quiet process, but incredibly powerful. Enough, in fact, to lift water over 300 feet into the sky in some of the tallest trees on Earth. All without a single pump. There's no heartbeat in a tree. No muscular push. Instead, water rises through capillary action, surface tension, and the pull of air drying the leaves above. Each droplet is pulled gently from molecule to molecule, like hands passing along a memory. You imagine it now. A drop of rain lands on soil, brushes past a root hair, and begins its slow climb. It travels through xylem tubes narrower than a strand of your hair, moving steadily upward, through the trunk, through the branches, into a leaf. All without pause. All without question. But does the tree know this journey is happening? Scientists don't like that word, no. Trees don't have brains. But what they do have is responsiveness. If a tree is damaged, the xylem shifts. If conditions change, flow patterns adapt. It's not cognition, but it is attention, distributed attention, the kind that exists in systems more than in minds. Xylem tubes can close in some places and widen in others. They can carry more or less water depending on temperature, sunlight, and humidity. And these changes can persist. A tree that experiences heavy rainfall followed by drought may show altered water flow patterns for years afterward. It's as if the tree is saying, I remember what too much water did to me. I'll move more carefully next time. Even more fascinating, trees under water stress can produce tiny clicking sounds, sometimes audible with sensitive microphones. Scientists call them cavitation events, tiny air bubbles forming in the xylem when water columns break. You can think of them as the tree's version of a throat clearing. A small fracture. A momentary lapse in the upward memory of rain. Some researchers study these clicks as indicators of drought response. But others hear something more poetic, a voice from within. Not speech exactly, but a kind of biomechanical whisper. You imagine yourself as a droplet inside the xylem now. It's cool, dark, and full of pressure. You're pulled upward relentlessly, surrounded by other droplets forming an unbroken chain. There's no friction, no frictional walls, just a long, watery elevator moving through time and tree flesh. In the moment before you reach the leaves, you wonder, does the tree feel this internal tide? Is there a kind of sensation in the flow? Here's where things get strange. There are studies suggesting trees can detect changes in hydraulic pressure and respond within minutes. Some shift their photosynthetic activity. Others change the openness of their stomata. These are not reactions you'd expect from a passive column of wood. They are subtle decisions. And here's a curiosity. Some trees preemptively adjust their xylem behavior before a storm even begins, responding to barometric pressure changes in the atmosphere. That's not memory exactly, but it feels close. Like sensing a familiar rhythm returning and adjusting your posture to receive it. So what does the xylem know of rain? Perhaps only this, that rain brings movement. That movement brings tension. That tension carries meaning. Maybe it doesn't think, but it listens. It notices. It adjusts. The story becomes even more poetic when you remember this. Xylem cells are dead when they function. They're hollow tubes, long since emptied of life, transformed into perfect conduits. So the water that travels through them moves through the memory of cells through ghost vessels. The tree lives on what once lived. Isn't that just a little haunting? But also comforting? You're sipping life through the bones of the past. That's what a tree does every day. Somewhere nearby, a branch sheds its final droplet, which falls with a tiny plip onto a leaf below. You let yourself drift a little deeper now. Not asleep, not awake, just in that in-between space where things feel slower. And as your breath softens, you wonder something odd. If water always rises, does the tree ever miss the rain? It's not a question science can answer, but poets might say yes. That each drop absorbed becomes a kind of love letter, a message remembered in bark, in sap, in the hum of the xylem. The tree never asks why the rain comes. It simply receives it, lifts it upward, and lets it go. And in doing so, it becomes a bridge from the soil to the sky. A slow-motion river turned vertical. A quiet act of faith. You're still beneath the oak. your body sinking slightly into the damp earth, the scent of moss mingling with the sweet trace of fallen rain. You glance at the trunk beside you, solid, tall, unmoving, but not silent, because this trunk holds rings. And in those rings, the tree might just be keeping time. And something more. Each year, a tree adds a new layer to its trunk. This is how it grows wider, not taller. And this slow, steady expansion leaves behind a record, a series of concentric rings that scientists can read like a diary. Some are thick, others thin. Some pale, some dark. They form depending on the climate, the rainfall, the warmth or cold of that particular year. Thick rings mean good times, plenty of water, sunshine, mild conditions. Thin rings whisper of hardship, drought, frost, fire. In this way, trees become archivists of weather. But what if the rings go beyond just marking time? What if they hold something closer to memory? Tree ring scientists, dendrochronologists, have discovered that these annual bands do more than track age. They reflect the chemical makeup of the tree's environment at the time they formed. That includes oxygen isotopes, carbon levels, even traces of pollutants. In other words, each ring is a fingerprint of its year, a frozen moment of experience. You imagine slicing the oak open like a geologic core sample, not in violence but in curiosity. What would its heartwood tell you? Perhaps the scent of a storm from 1872, the weight of a particularly heavy spring in 1931, the eerie stillness of a dry summer when birds stopped singing and even the insects grew quiet. And here's the curious part. Some trees respond differently to the same storm depending on their past. Identical conditions can produce varying ring thickness depending on what happened the year before. That implies not just recording, but modifying the record based on experience. Think about that. If a dry year follows another dry year, the tree adjusts more drastically. If a dry year follows a wet one, the adjustment is gentler. That's not reflex, it's conditional response, which smells an awful lot like a kind of memory. Not human memory, of course. There are no scenes, no images, no internal monologue of a tree saying, "Ah yes, the great storm of '68." But there is pattern change based on prior exposure, which is really all memory needs to be, a way to behave differently because of what came before. There's a fascinating study about tree rings and volcanic eruptions. In certain parts of the world, ancient trees hold records of eruptions from thousands of years ago. Their rings narrow sharply the year following a major eruption, due to ash blocking the sun and reducing photosynthesis. But even stranger, some trees show a smaller change in subsequent years when similar conditions occur. As if they're saying, "We've been here before, let's respond a little smarter this time." And then there's the edge of the forest science world. Researchers studying how tree rings might store stress for decades. Some trees show delayed growth reductions, even years after a traumatic event like drought or defoliation. It's like a stress echo, echoing faintly across seasons. Why? No one's sure. Maybe it's an internal budgeting system. Maybe it's biochemical conservatism. Or maybe, just maybe, it's because the tree remembers the cost of hardship and tries to soften the blow next time. You trace your finger along the outer bark beside you, not to peel it, but to feel the distance between now and then. Each centimeter between you and the center of the trunk is a layer of experience. The tree you lie beneath has been watching the sky longer than you've been alive. And it hasn't just been watching, it's been writing it down. And unlike our memories, so prone to fading or distortion, tree rings don't lie. They don't romanticize or embellish. They are calm, factual, honest, but they are not cold. Within their honesty is a kind of reverence, a quiet tribute to survival. One winter, bitter and wind-split. One summer, lush and loud with bees. One year of storm, another of drought. And through it all, the tree simply adds another line to the poem. Sometimes rings form anomalies, double bands, oddly shaped arcs, even scars. These can indicate unusual events. Lightning strikes, frost damage, insect infestation. Each becomes a kind of memory knot, the equivalent of a bruise that never fades. And here's something more whimsical, though still grounded in truth. Some scientists believe trees in the same forest can show synchronous ring patterns. They grow similarly during good years and shrink in bad years, even across species. It's like a group of friends who've been through the same things together, each with their own journal, but all telling roughly the same story. The forest, then, becomes a collective memory. Each tree a chapter, each ring a verse. Above you, a droplet finally tips from a high branch and lands with a soft pat on your forehead. You blink but don't move. The rain is mostly memory now, just faint taps, just whispers. And as you close your eyes again, you think, maybe you're not just lying beneath a tree tonight. Maybe you're lying inside a library. One made not of books, but of rings, sap, and silence. A place where rain becomes history, and history becomes shape, and shape becomes wisdom, carried onward through bark and bone and breathless time. The rain is all but gone now. What's left is softness, the hush that follows a storm, when the forest feels newly washed, like someone gently wrung out the air itself. You're still under the oak, your breath syncing with the rhythm of the woods, and the thought floats back to you again. How does the tree keep the storm? Not in memory as we know it, but chemically, invisibly, quietly. You see, when rain falls, it's not just water. It brings with it a complex mix of atmospheric ingredients. Dust from distant deserts, nitrogen compounds from the sky, pollen, spores, and microscopic life. Every drop is a miniature delivery system, and when those drops land on a leaf or soak into the soil, their cargo becomes part of the tree. One of the most fascinating things about rainfall is its signature. The isotopic composition of rainwater, its ratio of heavy to light hydrogen and oxygen atoms, varies depending on the season, the storm's origin, and the path it takes through the atmosphere. And when trees absorb that rain, those isotopic markers can be traced within their tissues. So in a very literal way, trees store the fingerprint of each storm. Deep inside the wood, water molecules become part of the cellulose matrix, the long chains of carbon and hydrogen that form the tree's very structure. Scientists have analyzed tree cores and found evidence of rainfall chemistry from decades past. That means a tree doesn't just mark that it rained, it preserves a whisper of what kind of rain it was. It's a chemical time capsule. And rain can bring more than just elements, it can carry stressors, pollutants, heavy metals, acid compounds. During the Industrial Revolution, trees near factories absorbed sulfur-laced rain, which altered their growth patterns and left chemical traces still detectable today. These compounds can trigger internal responses in the tree, not just damage but adaptation. A tree exposed to acidic rain may increase its protective compounds, natural chemicals like tannins or resins, secreted to protect tissues from harm. And here's the strange thing. Those defensive shifts can linger long after the storm has passed. So when the next rain comes, even if it's clean, the tree might react with a little more caution. A slightly altered chemistry, a more guarded uptake, as though saying, I've tasted this before. I know how it can sting. Isn't that a kind of memory? And beyond that, beyond water and acidity, there are the living passengers. Rain delivers microbes. Entire communities of bacteria and fungi travel on the backs of falling droplets. When they land on leaves or seep into bark, some of these organisms take hold. Others simply pass through. But a few become permanent residents, part of the tree's microbiome. In this way, a single rainstorm can introduce new species to the tree's ecosystem, not just around it, but inside it. There's a growing area of research exploring how trees adjust their internal chemistry based on the microbial partners they pick up from rain and soil. Some of these microbes help trees absorb nutrients. Others help fend off disease. A few are still mysterious, present, but silent. But the point is, the tree changes, carries the signature of what it's encountered. It's as though each storm leaves behind a mood, a note in the margins, not in language, but in molecules. You turn your head slightly and see a line of raindrops running down the bark, catching a streak of moonlight. They glisten like beads of thought, like the tree is still processing something. Imagine rain from the ocean, born of warm Pacific air, blown for days across continents. That water now touching this tree, carried perhaps by wind that once crossed coral reefs, salt plains, even the skin of a whale. When it lands here on a leaf or on a patch of moss, it brings the taste of somewhere else. And when the tree drinks it in, it becomes part of this place too. There's something wonderfully intimate about that. Rain as memory, rain as migration, and in a curious twist, some trees can actually change the chemistry of their leaves based on the minerals and compounds brought in by rain. That change can affect everything from how the leaf reflects light to how attractive it is to insects. So one storm might leave the tree glowing just slightly more. Another might cause it to darken, withdraw, defend. And over time, these chemical changes get layered like brushstrokes. The tree becomes a painting of all it has endured, a portrait in cellulose and storm traces. And there's still more, because the rain doesn't just change the tree, it also changes how the tree talks to itself. Some rain-absorbed compounds act as signals, telling the tree which genes to activate. It's a process called gene expression modulation, where environmental triggers affect which proteins the tree produces. So a rainstorm doesn't just nourish the tree, it edits the way the tree behaves. You let that thought settle. A storm doesn't shout, it suggests, and the tree listens. Maybe, in the deepest sense, memory doesn't have to be conscious. Maybe it's enough to carry change forward, to hold the marks of experience in your chemistry, your form, your very breath. You shift slightly, feeling the earth cradle you again. This storm, tonight's storm, is already inside the oak now. Its isotopes, its microbes, its message. The tree will respond slowly. It may grow differently next week. It may produce more sugars, or shift its scent, or share signals with the roots around it. But it won't forget. Not in thoughts, but in structure. Not in words, but in changes. The rain is gone, but it's still here. In the tree, in the soil, in you. The air has turned soft and heavy now, the kind of softness that only comes after something is released. The rain is gone, but the world hasn't quite moved on yet. There's a lingering stillness, like a sigh holding its breath. And above you, the oak tree continues to draw slow currents of water through itself, whispering secrets only it can hear. Tonight, let's follow the sap. Sap is the lifeblood of the tree, but not in the way blood is to you. It's not just one fluid, it's two. There's xylem sap, which moves water and minerals up from the roots, and there's phloem sap, which carries sugars and nutrients down from the leaves. Two flows, two directions, like thoughts moving back and forth along memory's edge. The sap you imagine tonight is the phloem kind. Slow, rich, sticky with sugars made from sunlight. Carries not just energy, but information. Hormones, defense signals, growth regulators, tiny chemical messages packed into syrupy rivers winding through the tree's living tissues. And here's the astonishing part. Those messages aren't just momentary. Some of them are stored. Some are sent only in response to cues the tree has learned from experience. Like a song the tree only hums when it smells the storm coming again. This brings us to the idea of priming. Trees that experience a certain kind of stress, say, a harsh drought or insect attack, can prime themselves to respond faster the next time that stress returns. The priming effect involves long-term changes to how sap carries information. It's as though the tree sets up shortcuts in its internal communication, streamlining its future response. It remembers not by thought, but by rewiring how it flows. So when a new storm arrives, especially if it's similar to one the tree has felt before, the sap doesn't wait. It acts. More sugars to the vulnerable limbs, more hormones to regulate the leaf pores, more defense compounds even before danger is visible. Like someone who's been through the worst and quietly prepared for more. You imagine the sap moving now, through channels laced within the trunk beside you. It flows gently, like a slow river under moonlight, full of meaning but without urgency. Each molecule knows where to go, or at least behaves as if it does. And scientists have found that sap flow itself can show traces of past trauma. In trees that have been damaged by frost, drought, disease, the sap's path may shift permanently. Some vessels clog, others open wider. In a way, the scars of the past redirect the flow of the present, like streams rerouted by old landslides. Now imagine something even stranger. In certain trees, Sap chemistry changes not just based on immediate conditions, but on past years' rainfall. A tree that experienced a particularly abundant season might carry more stored sugars in its phloem for seasons to come, sugars that shape how it responds even in years of scarcity. The memory of abundance can soften the edge of hardship. And here's a little-known quirk. Sap doesn't flow constantly. Pulses, not like a heartbeat, but with circadian rhythm. It changes with day and night, with temperature, with even the tiniest environmental shifts. It's an internal clock, and like all good clocks, it remembers time. There's even evidence that some trees can predict the arrival of morning and evening. Their sap shifts before the sun rises, before the air warms. As if the tree isn't just reacting to the world, it's expecting it. Not psychic, just familiar, like waking just before your alarm goes off because your body remembers the rhythm. So when you ask, can a tree remember the rain? You might also be asking, can a tree know when the rain is likely to return? Some say yes, or at least something like yes. If a storm came on the 5th night after a heat wave 3 years in a row, and this is the 5th night again, and the heat wave has just ended, the tree doesn't do math, of course, but it might adjust, shift its sap, open its pores, prepare. Not because it knows in a conscious way, but because it has built itself around the pattern. And that's one of the most beautiful things about trees. They become shaped by their place. Not just their form, but their function, their chemistry, their timing. A tree in a rainforest and its twin in a dry valley will grow differently, respond differently, remember differently, because they are written into the landscape that raised them. You let this sink in. You too are shaped by your place. The smells of your childhood, the rhythm of morning in your home, the kind of rain you grew up with. Maybe you, like the tree, carry memories in how you move, how you respond, how you feel a shift in the wind and somehow know to pause. The sap keeps flowing above you, quiet and unhurried. It remembers, not in language, not in pictures, but in practice, in pattern. A bat flutters once overhead, then silence. You stay still, thinking. Maybe the memory of the rain isn't something the tree holds. Maybe it is the tree, the way it grows, the way it bends, the way it feeds and shelters and waits. Maybe the sap that flows through it tonight carries not just moisture, but the soft imprint of every drop that ever fell before. The air is so still now that it feels like the forest is listening. Not just to the sounds, there are few of those left, but to itself. As if every branch, every patch of moss, every whispering root has turned inward. Reflective, quiet, attentive, you open your eyes again and look up. The oak's leaves hang motionless overhead, their wet surfaces gleaming in the faint moonlight. You wonder, do the leaves know what's coming? Do they recognize the touch of rain before it falls? Tonight, you drift into the idea that leaves might never forget. Leaves, after all, are not just passive solar panels. They are sensory organs highly tuned to light, humidity, pressure, scent, and touch. And as the tree's outermost skin, they're often the first to feel a storm's arrival. Even before the first drop falls, the air begins to shift, its pressure lowers, its scent changes, its temperature cools. Some trees respond to this change hours before rainfall. Their leaves begin to curl slightly. Their stomata, those tiny pores on the leaf surface, tighten or widen depending on the tree's history with similar storms. It's not guesswork, it's conditioning, experience. Studies have shown that leaves exposed to repeated cycles of drought and rain will eventually begin to respond differently to early signals. For instance, after several dry spells, a tree's leaves might close their stomata earlier than before, not because the air is drier, but because the leaf remembers what tends to follow such a signal: more drought. It's not a thought. It's a learned behavior, written in cells. There's even evidence of chemical anticipation, trees that begin producing protective compounds like abscisic acid before a storm arrives based on subtle shifts in the air's chemistry. These are not reflexes. They are decisions drawn from patterns stored in the biology of the leaf. You watch as one leaf above you trembles slightly, not from wind, but perhaps from some inner shift. Perhaps it's adjusting its response in real time. Feeling something ancient and quiet, the whisper of air pressure, the trace of returning rain. Now let's explore another strange thing about leaves. They can change their own physiology based on previous rainfall. Not just on a seasonal basis, but on a memory timeline. For instance, leaves that have experienced high rainfall in early development often have more developed cuticles, a waxy layer that protects from future water loss. Conversely, leaves born during droughts may grow smaller with tighter pore control. These adaptations persist even when the immediate condition changes. So when the rain finally returns, those leaves don't react as though it's new. They react as though it's familiar. Sometimes warily, sometimes with relief, but always with nuance. And you may not realize this, but leaves also have a nose. Well, sort of. They can detect volatile organic compounds, VCs, in the air, molecules released by neighboring plants or carried on the wind before a storm. These scents act as chemical whispers. They tell a leaf what's happening nearby. Some trees, after smelling the scent of freshly cut grass or crushed leaves from a neighbor, will preemptively bolster their defenses. It's almost as if the leaves say something's coming. We've smelled this before. Isn't that its own kind of memory? Let's add a layer of magic. Some scientists believe that leaves may also recognize the electromagnetic signature of an approaching storm. It's subtle and still a mystery, but there are measurable changes in electrical activity across a leaf's surface in the hours before heavy rain. No one quite understands how or why, but it's as if the leaf can feel the future brushing gently against its skin. And the most curious part of all? Some of those changes are stronger in trees that have previously experienced storm damage, as though past hardship has trained the leaves to listen more closely. You rest your hand gently on the ground beside you. Tiny seedlings push up nearby, just a few leaves each. New to the world, but even they might carry the legacy of older rains. Because leaves don't act alone. They grow under the influence of the tree's whole history. The chemical memory of past seasons is carried into new leaves, shaping how they function from the moment they unfurl. A leaf is never just reacting. It is inheriting. So here's something poetic. Imagine each leaf as a journal page. Some crisp and new, some soft with wear. All marked invisibly with past weather, past choices, past survival. Tonight, the pages are still, but inside, they are full. You gaze upward again, and the leaves look like stars glinting softly in the darkness, each one a small, luminous record of what the tree has known. If trees had faces, the leaves would be the eyes. Always outward, always watching, always remembering. And perhaps, just perhaps, when the next rain falls, and it will, the leaves will shiver not from cold or wind, but from recognition. That quiet moment of yes, I remember you. The forest has fallen into a kind of stillness that only happens after the sky has emptied itself. Not silence, exactly, but a thick, living quiet where even the insects seem to hum more slowly. You lie there, watching the branches of the oak rise into the dark like slow-moving dancers, and you think again about storms. Not just the water they bring, but the noise. Because storms are not just wet, they are loud. Thunder, wind, the sharp clatter of rain against leaves. They shake the world in their own language. And you begin to wonder, do trees hear the storm? Of course, not with ears. Trees have no tympanic membranes, no cochleas. But they are sensitive. Deeply so. They don't need ears to feel vibration. There's a quiet field of study biotremology that looks at how organisms detect and respond to vibration. For trees, this might be wind rumbling through the trunk or the faint shuffle of insect feet on bark. But the most dramatic of these vibrations comes with thunder. Thunder sends deep, low-frequency sound waves rolling through the ground. If you've ever felt your chest shake from a boom in the distance, then imagine how that feels to a root buried in the soil, directly tied to the structure of the earth. Some researchers suggest trees may detect these vibrations through mechanoreceptors, sensitive proteins in their cells that respond to pressure. And when they detect it, they respond. There's evidence that some trees shift the behavior of their leaves and stomata after a thunderstorm, even before the rain arrives. These changes are not explained by moisture or light, they seem to be responses to sound. A kind of anticipatory dance triggered by thunder's low whisper. You imagine this moment now, a distant storm. The sky cracks. The sound rolls through the air and into the trunk of the oak beside you. And inside, something stirs. A subtle tightening. A pause in the sap. A breath held. It's possible that thunder serves as a kind of early warning system, not just for trees, but for the entire forest. A deep, rumbling signal that something is about to change. And then there's wind. You felt it, the sudden gusts before a downpour, the way the trees begin to sway and bend long before a single drop falls. Trees are extraordinarily attuned to movement. Their leaves flutter in different rhythms depending on the wind's angle and strength. Their branches adjust, redistributing tension. And deep within, the cambium, the layer of living cells just under the bark, responds to that pressure with microscopic shifts. Repeated exposure to strong winds can actually change a tree's shape. not just in form but in behavior. A tree that has survived many storms often grows shorter and thicker, less likely to snap. And that thickening response happens only in trees that have experienced real, physical strain. In other words, trees grow based on what the wind tells them. There's even a phenomenon called thigmomorphogenesis, a very gentle word for a very old idea. It describes how touch and mechanical stress influence the way plants grow. If a tree is shaken regularly or stroked by wind, it often becomes sturdier, more compact. That's not accidental. That's history written into form. So you wonder, when the wind returns again, like tonight, does the tree remember? Not just in its shape, but in how it moves, how it leans, how it resists. It doesn't stand the same way after 100 storms as it did after one. Now consider this, lightning. It's the loudest, brightest moment a tree can experience, and also the most dangerous. A single strike can split a trunk, boil the sap inside, shatter limbs. Yet many trees survive. And more interestingly, they change after. Some trees hit by lightning grow more slowly in the following years. Others heal quickly but show altered bark texture or ring structure. In rare cases, trees struck by lightning seem to produce more resin, a natural defense mechanism, as if girding themselves for future danger. But here's the oddest part, some trees near a lightning strike, even if not hit directly, change too. It could be the electrical field. It could be the pressure wave. But something in the storm's violence leaves a mark on those who merely witnessed it. Sound without contact, memory without pain. And you might be tempted to dismiss this as incidental. Just physics, just mechanics. But over time, the storm's signature remains. Not just in the damaged bark or the bent limbs, but in how the tree reacts to future storms. Some trees, after particularly violent events, close their stomata sooner, shift their root growth, adjust their hormone balance, all of which lasts longer than the storm itself, sometimes for years. So perhaps a storm doesn't just pass through a forest. Perhaps it leaves a memory behind. You can feel it now under your fingertips against the ground. A kind of low hum still echoing in the soil. Perhaps not from the storm just past, but from storms long ago. The vibrations echo down, remembered by roots, by rings, by rhythm. And above you, the canopy stirs again. Just slightly. No thunder now, just the weight of night pressing gently against the leaves. But still, the trees listen. They always listen. Maybe the forest doesn't need ears. It only needs the storm. And time. And when the thunder returns, whenever it does, the trees will recognize it. Not with fear, not with thought, but with a deep, creaking readiness. Like a breath drawn in. Like a song remembered. Like the wind saying, softly, you've heard this before. It's past midnight now. The sky has settled, the rain has long ceased, and the forest has entered a kind of lullaby. Even the sounds that remain, a soft drip here, the quiet hush of wind brushing needles, seem to exist only in service of sleep. And yet something in you stays awake. Not restless, just listening. You're not the only one. Because even in darkness, even when all seems still, the tree above you is busy. Trees don't sleep, exactly, not like you do. But they rest. They follow a rhythm, a circadian pulse that shapes their chemistry, their behavior, and yes, their memory. And tonight, the oak is in its nighttime mode, doing work that daylight never sees. Let's start with something you can't see. The leaves above you are slightly drooped. Not dramatically, but enough that if you could fast forward a time lapse, you'd notice them rising in the morning and lowering again at night. This is called nyctinasty, and it's the plant world's way of saying it's time to pause. The oak's branches, too, relax just a little during the night. This might sound fanciful, but it's been confirmed using laser scanners and infrared mapping. In their resting state, trees quite literally change posture. Why? Because nighttime brings a different world. A world without photosynthesis. A world where water movement slows, sugars shift direction, and internal conversations grow quieter but not silent. At night, trees refocus. They redistribute resources, shift their biochemistry, and process the experiences of the day. Some researchers call this the dark phase, when the tree attends to maintenance. Like you filing memories as you sleep. And it turns out trees have circadian clocks not unlike your own. Embedded in their cells are genetic timekeepers, mechanisms that sync their behavior to the light-dark cycle. These clocks control when enzymes are made, when stomata open or close, even when certain growth hormones rise and fall. But here's the lovely part, the tree's nighttime rhythm isn't just reactive. It's anticipatory. That means the oak above you doesn't wait for sunrise to adjust its physiology. It begins shifting before the first light appears. It expects the day, because it remembers the last. And if that's not memory, what is? You breathe in slowly and the air carries a sweetness that feels different than before. It's the scent of night photosynthesis's cousin, respiration. In the dark, without light to power sugar production, the tree switches gears. Now it breaks down some of the sugars it made during the day to fuel essential processes, cellular repair, defense mechanisms, even root growth. Yes, roots often grow more at night. Strange, isn't it? When the visible world sleeps, the invisible one surges forward. Down below, beneath the earth you lie on, the tree's roots are sending out messages. Small pulses of hormone, gentle flows of nutrient, long fingers probing the soil in slow expansion. Root tips covered in soft sheets called root caps gently part the ground as they search, sometimes for water, sometimes for space, and sometimes for something else. And here's something quietly astonishing. Root growth isn't random. It's patterned, guided, influenced by past success and failure. When a root finds a rich patch of soil, it doesn't just drink, it learns. The nearby rootlets expand. The chemical signature of that good patch becomes part of the internal map. So the next time a similar scent or texture is detected nearby, the tree may shift growth toward it. This happens more efficiently at night. When the distractions of light are gone, the tree focuses inward and downward. It dreams in soil. You might smile at that, tree dreams. But the parallel is compelling. In sleep, your brain consolidates memory, strengthens connections, files the day's noise into usable patterns. For a tree, the night is when it rebalances itself, tunes its inner systems, and some say builds on its learned experience. There's even evidence that trees under regular day-night cycles fare better than those grown in artificial constant light. They grow stronger, more resilient. They remember stress more effectively and recover faster. So what happens when a storm falls during this sacred cycle? The tree adapts its rhythms. If rainfall comes at night, the tree doesn't simply wait until daylight to respond. Its systems wake up. Water uptake increases. Sap shifts. Internal chemistry adapts in real time, but influenced by what time it is. For instance, a nighttime storm may trigger a different hormonal response than a daytime one, even if the storm itself is identical. That suggests the tree's clock contextualizes the experience. It says, rain, yes, but rain at night. That means something different. That's memory and rhythm working together. And what's more, trees that experience repeated stress at night, say, nightly drought conditions, show altered gene expression that differs from daytime stress exposure, as if their bodies are filing the event differently depending on when it happened. Imagine that. A tree doesn't just remember what happened, it remembers when. And in the gentle dark, as you lie beneath the sleeping giant, you begin to feel it too. The night has a different kind of intelligence. A softer, slower kind, the kind that listens more than it speaks. The oak, now heavy with the memory of rain, is not thinking about survival. It's simply doing what it has done for hundreds of years, responding, adapting, adjusting, remembering. And maybe you are too. You shift your body slightly against the softened ground. It yields just a little, like a blanket that's been warmed by long sleep. Around you, the forest feels denser, somehow more intimate, like a room where someone has just whispered. The oak's limbs no longer drip, but they still hang heavy, carrying the memory of water in every fiber. And tonight, you find yourself thinking about thirst. Because for every storm a tree receives, there are others it waits for. A tree doesn't always drink when it wants. Sometimes it goes thirsty. And what's more extraordinary, once it has been truly thirsty, it seems never to forget. Drought leaves a mark, not just in the soil or the leaves, but in the entire personality of the tree. When rain is scarce, a tree doesn't panic. It doesn't scramble. It contracts. It tightens. It begins a quiet ritual of conservation. Stomata close to prevent water loss. Growth slows or halts altogether. Root tips may retract or pause their spread. It's not fear, it's prudence. A kind of botanical budgeting. And the fascinating part? The choices made during drought are often remembered long after the soil has been quenched again. Trees that survive severe droughts have been observed years later, still behaving more conservatively than their neighbors. They open their stomata more slowly, produce fewer leaves, grow in tighter forms. It's as if the memory of thirst becomes a permanent part of how they live. And sometimes that memory is passed down. Yes, passed to the next season, to new leaves, even to seeds. Scientists call this phenomenon stress imprinting, a kind of epigenetic inheritance where environmental challenges change how genes are expressed, not their code, but their behavior. In a way, the tree adapts not just its body, but its descendants to better face what it has known. If a sapling grows from a parent tree that endured drought, that sapling may begin life already more water efficient, even if it has never felt drought itself. So when we ask whether a tree can remember the rain, we also must ask whether it can remember its absence, the crackle of dry bark, the ache of parched roots, the long quiet days when the canopy no longer whispers. And all signs say yes. The xylem, which once carried water freely, becomes prone to cavitation, those tiny air bubbles we talked about earlier. After a drought, those old bubbles may linger, making future water transport more difficult. But in response, the tree often adjusts its internal plumbing, growing narrower vessels that are more resistant to stress. Less efficient, perhaps, but safer. It's a trade-off, a long memory of risk shaping every drop that follows. Some species, like oaks and pines, are known to build these resilient vessels after droughts, meaning the next rain doesn't just restore, it's received differently, more carefully, like someone drinking slowly even when the glass is full again. And drought doesn't just shape the tree, it shapes the forest. Trees under water stress emit chemical signals, volatile organic compounds that drift into the air and soil. These signals can reach neighboring trees, which sometimes begin their own drought responses before their roots even feel the dryness. You picture this like a neighborhood of quiet voices. One tree sighs in thirst and the others lower their voices in kind. And once the storm does arrive, the memory of drought doesn't vanish. In fact, it often becomes sharper. Some trees seem to treat the rain not as a return to normal, but as a rare gift. They slow their uptake, reinforce their cell walls, store more sugars in reserve. As if saying, we won't forget what it's like when the sky says nothing. There's something hauntingly beautiful about this. We often think of rain as renewal, and it is. But in the forest, renewal never erases. It overlays. The memory of dryness lingers like rings beneath paint. It influences how the next brush stroke is made. And there's one more mystery. Certain trees, especially those that have endured cycles of repeated drought, appear to predict future dry spells better. Not in a mystical way, but in how they preemptively adjust. Their stomata close slightly before drought conditions hit. Their sap slows. They even produce smaller leaves in anticipation. It's not just survival. It's strategy. And it's based on memory. A memory not held in mind, but in method. You lie there, warm beneath your coat of night air, and think about all the times you've gone thirsty, not for water, but for ease, or for rest. And how once you've known that kind of lack, you never quite move the same again. Maybe trees are like that too. Maybe drought makes them wiser, not weaker. And maybe the next time the sky opens and the rain returns, like tonight, the tree lifts its leaves a little differently. Not in celebration, but in reverence. A slow, quiet thank you. Not because it forgot, but because it didn't. The roots below you sleep lightly now, and the leaves above have stilled completely. But within the oak, that ancient memory of thirst hums on, guiding, shaping, waiting. Because even when the rain falls, the tree remembers being dry. And that memory, like a scar turned into a compass, shows it how to grow. The hours slide past without you noticing. That's the gift of the forest. It stretches time, softens its edges, makes the minutes feel like deep, slow breaths. You remain still beneath the oak, the ground beneath you warm from the earlier rain, the air above you thick with presence. Somewhere out of sight, something stirs in the underbrush, but it doesn't break the peace. Everything here feels connected, and maybe that's because it is. Tonight, your thoughts drift downward again, below the leaves, below the roots, into the hidden web that ties the forest together. A quiet network, woven not from wood or leaf, but from threads finer than spider silk. Fungi, more specifically mycorrhizal networks, the vast microscopic connections between tree roots and fungal filaments that make up what some scientists call the wood wide web. If you picture a root system as a tree's underground fingers, then mycorrhizal fungi are the gloves, extending the tree's reach, helping it absorb nutrients, and forming living connections between neighboring plants. And these connections do more than share food. They share information. Imagine this. Two trees stand a few meters apart. One is older, broader, perhaps wiser. The other is younger, still learning its place in the world. When rain falls or fails to fall, both trees are affected. But in recent studies, scientists have observed something remarkable. Trees can signal one another about changing conditions via these fungal threads. The older tree, perhaps having endured decades of storms and droughts, might warn its neighbor, the rain is coming, or the rain is gone. These warnings aren't spoken. They're chemical signals passed through fungal channels, like tiny molecular notes sent from one root to another. These compounds can cause a younger tree to adjust its behavior before it directly experiences the change. And what's even more fascinating, Some trees will send sugar to their neighbors in need. Not always and not without cost, but in moments of stress, connected trees have been seen sharing resources through these underground networks, especially during or after difficult events like drought. A tree that has weathered many dry years might help sustain another, younger tree during its first hardship. You can't help but think of that as a kind of mentorship. Quiet, nutrient-based empathy. Now imagine how this could relate to memory. If one tree survives a historic drought and later that drought pattern begins again, its response could help warn the others. A kind of shared remembering not held in one body, but in a network. Not thoughts passed along, but behaviors, responses, adaptation. It's a distributed memory, a forest's collective knowing. You breathe in, and the air is rich with the smell of wet decay. That lovely earthy scent that signals healthy fungal activity. What you're smelling is geosmin, a compound released by soil microbes. It's one of the most comforting smells on Earth, and tonight, it feels like a lullaby. And beneath that scent lies a vast, intricate city. 1 teaspoon of forest soil may hold several miles of fungal threads. Most of them are invisible, but they're there moving, sensing, connecting. These networks can span entire forests, linking hundreds of trees, even across species. A maple might be connected to a beech, an oak to a birch. Through these fungal filaments, they exchange not only nutrients, but status updates. They signal when attacked by pests. They share alerts about pathogens. And yes, they respond to moisture patterns. So when the rain returns, like tonight, the network hums with change. Water availability affects fungal growth. Some mycorrhizal species flourish after rain, sending out new threads to explore freshly softened soil. Others slow down, conserving energy. And in this shifting network, the trees feel the change. Not as a thought, not as news, but as sensation. And that sensation feeds into their decisions. Where to grow, when to rest, what to strengthen. It's as if the forest doesn't just remember the rain, it discusses it. And in some cases, it learns from it. Scientists have observed that forests exposed to repeated moisture patterns begin to show synchronization, not just in growth, but in root and fungal development. It's as though the trees and fungi have formed a shared rhythm, responding as a group to the pulse of the seasons. There's even evidence that certain fungi retain a kind of epigenetic memory, too. Their gene expression changes in response to past environmental conditions, affecting how they interact with trees in the future. So the memory isn't just stored in the trees, it's embedded in the relationships between trees and their fungal partners. It's a soft, soil-based kind of wisdom. And tonight, that wisdom is under you, surrounding you, lifting you as you lie there. You imagine it now. The message of tonight's rain passing silently along those fungal threads, reaching trees you'll never see. A birch down the hill, a cedar tucked near the stream, maybe even a seedling just breaking soil, receiving its first signal. Water is here. Grow. It's not a voice. It's a feeling, presence, a story shared in scent and sugar. And above, the oak stands quiet, but not alone. Because under the forest floor, memory is not singular. It is shared. And when the next storm comes, it will not fall on one tree. It will fall on a network of remembering. Each tree, each root, each thread ready. Because they've told each other, we've felt this before. The forest is even darker now, more velvet than shadow. The moon has tucked itself behind a cloud, and everything feels deeper, closer, quieter. It's the kind of dark that makes you feel like you're floating, even though you're still lying on the ground. Your body warm from the memory of rain and the hush of a tree older than story. You think about how long this tree has stood here, how many nights it's watched the moon disappear behind clouds, how many rains it has tasted. And then another thought whispers through you. What if some part of this oak remembers not just its storms, but the storms its ancestors knew? That's the mystery of epigenetics. Epigenetics is the study of how experiences, like drought, cold, or yes, even rainfall, can leave chemical marks on genes. Not changes to the DNA code itself, but to how that code is read. These marks, often made of methyl groups or other tiny molecular tags, can be passed down from parent to offspring. In animals, this has been observed in cases of famine or trauma. But in plants, especially long-lived ones like trees, these inherited memories can shape entire forests. So if a tree lived through years of harsh drought, it might alter the way its genes express moisture-handling traits. And if that tree produces seeds, some of those traits may carry on. A sapling that never knew thirst might behave as if it had. Now stretch that idea across generations. The oak above you may carry, tucked inside its cells, a whisper of memory from a tree that lived 3 centuries ago. A tree that stood in a time before asphalt or satellites. A tree that waited for rain in a different climate, under different stars. That ancient oak may have left more than wood behind. It may have passed on guidance. A memory of adaptation. Epigenetic markers can influence things like how deep a tree's roots grow, how quickly its leaves respond to light, even how tightly its stomata close during stress. These aren't conscious decisions. They're inheritances, soft echoes of experience that quietly shape behavior. And here's where it gets stranger. These inherited changes don't always fade. Some persist for multiple generations, even when the stressor is gone. Imagine a lineage of trees that grew during a particularly stormy century. More rainfall, more wind, more noise. If those conditions imprinted changes on their genome expression, their descendants might be more conservative with growth, more robust in their branch structure, even if they never feel that same kind of storm. A forest grown from the memory of wind. And when the rain finally returns, as it has tonight, it may feel not like surprise, but recognition. Confirmation. Yes, we knew you'd come. Some scientists are beginning to believe this kind of inherited preparation could be critical in helping forests adapt to climate change. If trees can remember what came before, even faintly, they may be better equipped to face the unexpected. Or perhaps to expect it. There's poetry in that, isn't there? Not just a tree remembering rain, but a forest remembering rain it never felt. You feel that idea settle into your chest like a warm stone. And then there's another kind of inheritance, one less studied, but just as haunting, physical echoes in wood grain. Trees that grew in a certain rhythm, perhaps slower in early years, due to hardship, often pass on seedling traits that mirror their own growth patterns. Not genetically, but structurally. It's almost as if their entire body becomes a kind of template, and those offspring grow in ways shaped by a past they didn't live. You picture the oak above you as a child of storms, its great branches shaped by the memory of wind it never felt, its roots stretching with the cautious optimism of ancestors that learned to dig deep. And now it passes that on, because trees don't raise their young the way animals do, but they do leave traces, genetic hints, chemical clues, epigenetic nudges. So the next generation may know, without knowing, what kind of world it is entering. And here's where the lines blur between science and wonder. This inheritance isn't limited to offspring. Trees connected through root grafts or fungal networks can pass on some of these adaptive signals in real time, not just as legacy but as community. The past shared not only forward but sideways. Maybe the forest doesn't move through time as a series of individuals. Maybe it flows more like water, with experiences rippling from tree to tree, generation to generation. A memory not in one mind, but in the collective body. The storm tonight, then, becomes more than weather. It becomes another ripple in that great memory. Another chapter added to the story. You picture a seedling, just a few feet away, curling slightly under its first real rain. It doesn't know the word storm, but it feels something ancient in its sap, pattern returning, and somewhere, deep in its tiny core, it adjusts, not because of what it sees, but because of what it remembers. The wind stirs once more through the canopy, and it sounds different now, thinner, gentler, almost cautious, as though even the breeze has grown reflective. The storm has long passed, but its memory lingers in every part of the forest. The scent of damp bark, the deep hush in the roots, and inside the tree above you, there's still motion. Not loud, not urgent, just movement. A hidden rhythm beneath the bark. A pulse almost, but not a heartbeat. Trees don't have blood. No chambers. No valves. And yet, when scientists hook up sensors sensitive enough to detect micrometric shifts, they find something strange. Trees pulse. Not with a beat exactly, but with slow, repeated fluctuations in internal pressure. Like a breath or a tide or the way your chest rises and falls when you're nearly asleep. Some of these pulses align with daily cycles, sunlight and shadow, temperature changes, water pressure. Others don't seem to follow any external rhythm at all. They happen unpredictably, like the tree is having a thought too deep to trace. It's called stem diameter variation. The tree's trunk subtly contracts and expands over hours. Some pulses are large enough to feel if your hand rests long against the bark. Others require instruments, but they're there. A soft internal drum. And when rain returns after absence, those pulses change. They become stronger, more regular, as if the tree is breathing in again after holding its breath. You wonder, is this the tree's way of feeling the rain? These pressure shifts aren't random. They follow the tree's water transport system. When water is abundant, the tension inside xylem eases. The sap flows freely. The inner tissues swell. And in reverse, during drought, those tissues shrink, the tension sharpens, and the tree becomes more rigid. So even without leaves or flowers, even in the dead of night, the tree expresses its condition. Quietly, rhythmically. It doesn't just survive the rain. It registers it. And scientists have begun to notice something even more peculiar. These pulses can occur independently of external stimuli. No change in moisture, no light shift, no wind, and yet the tree moves. Something internal. Something timed. Could it be a kind of chronobiology? A biological clock running silently under the bark? Some believe so. These pulses may help regulate internal transport, just like your heart regulates blood. Not with force, but with rhythm. A pressure wave moving water and sugars where they're needed most. And like a heart, it changes depending on what the body remembers. In trees that have endured stress, cold, heat, injury, those pulses change. Not for a day, but for seasons. Their rhythm slows or sharpens. They grow more erratic or more consistent. The tree, it seems, adjusts its internal time based on experience. Is that memory? Maybe not in the way you recall a smell or a song, but in the way your body tenses before a fall or slows when the air feels heavy with history. Maybe trees remember through rhythm. There's a study that shows trees that were once flooded, even briefly, show altered stem pulses years later. A kind of vascular echo. A pulse shaped by water long since gone. You think about that. How water leaves more than wetness. How it changes the tempo of a living being. And then you wonder something more poetic. Do trees have moods? Not like happiness or fear, but states, phases, waves of internal change brought on by time, by weather, by memory. And if they do, would tonight feel calm? Probably. The storm has passed. The water has been absorbed. The tension inside the xylem has eased. The tree pulses more gently now, slower than it did at dusk. Not quite sleeping, but close. You press your palm against the bark. You feel nothing at first, but after a few moments, something presses back. Not strong, just enough to feel present. There's no language in it, but it feels like a hello. A quiet, pulsing hello from something older than your oldest memory. You stay like that a while, letting your breath match the imagined rhythm of the tree. It's slower than yours, but steady, soothing. And then another idea drifts in. If a tree pulses in response to rain, if it changes based on past experience, if those changes linger over seasons, then maybe, just maybe, those pulses are the memory. Not stored in a box somewhere inside, but spread across its entire body. A rhythm that adapts. A rhythm that remembers. You think about your own body. How it keeps time without clocks. How it reacts to danger even before you're fully aware. How your heartbeat changes when someone says your name. Maybe the oak does something similar. Maybe its pulse quickens not with fear, but with recognition. When the rain returns, it doesn't ask what it is. It knows. It adjusts its rhythm and kind. And that rhythm carries forward long after the storm ends. Because for a tree, memory isn't a file. It's a frequency. And tonight, you're lying in tune with it. The forest feels suspended now, held gently between night and morning, like the last long note of a song not quite finished. You've stopped noticing the cold. Or maybe the cold has stopped noticing you. Either way, you're deeply still, as if you've been folded into the breath of the trees. Above you, the canopy barely shifts. Below you, something vast and ancient continues to hum. You begin to wonder not about a single tree anymore, but about the many. What happens when an entire forest remembers? Because trees are not solitary. They're relational. They grow in clusters, communities, groves. They shape one another, lean toward or away, compete and cooperate, sharing soil and space and silence. And as we've seen, through roots and fungi, they can even share signals. So when rain comes to one tree, it doesn't come to only one tree. It arrives to a network, And that network, like any good system, responds not only as individuals, but as a group. Forests, especially old ones, begin to display emergent behavior patterns that arise not from one tree alone, but from the sum of many small interactions. Rainfall timing, drought cycles, sunlight shifts, these things shape the whole. Entire groves have been observed altering their flowering or seed-dropping patterns in synchronization, sometimes even across species. Oaks and maples releasing seeds in the same year. Pines and firs aligning their cycles over vast distances. Not always, not perfectly, but often enough to suggest something beyond coincidence. It's called mass seeding, and while theories abound, no one fully understands why it happens. One idea? Collective memory. That trees which have experienced certain rainfall cycles or long droughts will decide in unspoken accord to invest heavily in reproduction during the same season. A kind of synchronized risk. A forest-wide bet that conditions are right. And here's the remarkable thing, these mass events often follow unusual climatic patterns from years prior. As if the forest is saying, we've felt this before. And this is the moment we've waited for. Memory spread across thousands. You think again of the mycorrhizal networks below. The messages that pass from tree to tree carried on chemical threads. These communications don't always speak in crisis. Sometimes they carry signals of timing. One tree begins preparing buds earlier than usual and others follow suit. Not instantly, not always, but enough. A whisper becomes a murmur, becomes a movement. And scientists are now asking whether these patterns might stem from something deeper than real-time signals. Could it be that the forest itself holds onto the shapes of past weather and uses that memory to coordinate? Consider this. In boreal forests, tree growth rings across entire regions often show similar widths, broad or narrow, depending on past rainfall. This alignment isn't just physical, it's biological synchrony. A whole biome responding to shared memory of climate. And what's more, once these rings fall into rhythm, they often stay in rhythm. For decades, it's as if a whole region of trees begins to breathe together. To adjust together. Not just for survival, but for balance. And balance is everything in a forest. When rain falls too early, certain species pause. When it falls late, others step in. Each species has its own dance, but they learn to move in relation to one another. Like musicians sharing a stage. And sometimes, when conditions repeat, when the rains fall in a familiar cadence, the entire forest seems to exhale. Leaves unfurl just a little sooner. Buds form more fully. Sap flows more freely. There's a kind of shared optimism, as if the forest recognizes the moment. And when rain fails to arrive, when dry years stack one atop the next, the forest also responds. Trees shrink their crowns. Some drop leaves early. Others redirect sugars downward to roots. But more than that, the forest waits. You see it in satellite imagery, in carbon fluxes, in the subtle shifts in air chemistry. Entire regions go quiet. Not dead, just cautious. Conserving. Together. And when the rains finally return, like tonight, each tree opens in its own way. But the memory of the dry years lingers in all of them. It's visible in their shape, their scars, their rhythm. It's not a memory any single tree owns. It's shared, carried like a story passed around a circle. Not recited. Lived? You can feel the collective rhythm now, even though nothing moves. It's in the stillness. In the way the forest holds its breath just a little longer. Not because it doubts the rain, but because it remembers the times when it didn't come back so soon. The forest does not take water for granted. It drinks deeply but slowly, gratefully, because even as the rain nourishes, it stirs the memory of absence. And through that memory, the forest becomes more than a group of trees. It becomes a living record, a body of knowing, a place where each leaf, each root, each drop is part of something bigger. A memory so wide it holds time. A memory so quiet it takes a forest to hear it. The first hints of morning are beginning to blush against the horizon. Not light yet, not quite, but something softer. The darkness is thinning. The shapes of the forest are returning. The silhouettes of trees are no longer shadows but forms, real and reaching. And the oak above you, your silent companion through the night, stands soaked but calm. Rain again, but different. Because no storm ever returns exactly the same. And no tree receives it exactly as it did before. You feel this now, not just as a thought, but in your bones. That sense that everything you've experienced leaves a trace. That every encounter, even with something as simple as falling water, changes you. And trees are no different. The oak above you, with its thick trunk and wide canopy, is not the same tree it was last year, or last decade, or even yesterday. It has changed quietly and continuously with every breeze, every season, every drop. And tonight's rain, however soft, however fleeting, will become part of its shape. Not a memory the way we hold memories. No names, no dates, no stories. But a mark, a shift, a response. A drop of rain falls, and perhaps the tree's cambium layer thickens slightly more than it would have before. Perhaps the roots grow a fraction further into soil once hardened by drought. Perhaps the leaves, when they unfurl tomorrow, do so with slightly more confidence. Or caution. Or clarity. Each change infinitesimal, but real. And altogether, they form the next version of the tree. Still itself, but different. You think about that. How rain, when it falls, doesn't just pass through, it becomes part of things. Absorbed, remembered, used, carried forward. The way heartbreak becomes wisdom, or joy becomes a habit, or fear becomes instinct. A tree doesn't hold on to the rain. It becomes it. You think about the earlier drops, the ones that raced along the bark, the ones that soaked into the soil, the ones that flowed through the xylem or hung for a while on the edge of a leaf before vanishing into air. All of them still here in some form. In the wood, in the sap, in the root tips far below, and even in the air you're breathing now, soft, cool, freshly rinsed. This storm will not be forgotten. It will echo in the tree's patterns, in its growth rings, in its chemical composition, in its gentle adjustments. And it may be passed on through roots, through seeds, through the hidden fungal web that stitches the forest together. The memory of this rain might shape a future leaf, a future branch, even a future forest. You glance upward once more. The oak stands still, but it is not the same oak you met tonight. It has changed, slightly, and so have you. Because you too are made of moments like this, quiet changes, unnoticed shifts, soft encounters that alter how you see, how you feel, how you move through the world. You'll wake in the morning and you may not remember every detail of this night, but something in you will. A rhythm, a quiet, a knowing. The storm has passed, and what remains is memory, not loud or sharp, but woven gently into bark, into roots, into breath. You rest your hand once more on the trunk beside you. It's cool but steady. You wonder if it knows you're here. Maybe not, but maybe it doesn't need to. Because tonight, for a little while, you shared something. A moment, a rhythm, a rainfall. And that is enough. Let yourself settle now. Let the thoughts quiet. Let the breath deepen and the muscles soften, as if your whole body is a branch loosening after a long wind. There's nothing to do, nowhere to go. The night has held you gently and you have listened well. The forest around you exhales. The soil warms just slightly. The roots relax, returning to their slow, secret work. The storm is over, and all that remains is the quiet after. Let your imagination drift upward through the branches, tracing the paths the rain took. Let it curl through the leaf tips where the water once clung. Let it follow the path of sap, spiraling downward, carrying the storm's gift to every corner of the tree. Now drift lower into the roots, into the soil, into the threads of fungi, and deeper still into the cool, dark memory that lies beneath. There is no need to understand it all. Just trust that it's there. The memory of rain. The feeling of being held by something older than worry. The tree does not dream, but it remembers. And you gently are becoming part of that memory too. Let the last words fade now. Let the rhythm slow. Let sleep rise around you like mist on the forest floor. You are safe. You are still. You are remembered.